Hey there, I'm Mike Peel, Chair of InterDrone, and thank you for joining us today on this InterDrone webinar. Today's topic is the commercial drone market in 2020, moderated by me, but our guest speaker today is Michael Blades, Vice President of Aerospace, Defense, and Security ADS at Frost & Sullivan. Before we go on to Mike, I'm going to do a few housekeeping slides. Just to remind you, the audio portion of this webcast is broadcast over the internet. Make sure your computer device audio is available, unmuted, and the volume is turned up at an acceptable level. If you're having trouble receiving the audio, please select the question mark in the upper corner of the webinar and interface with the Test My System Now. This will give you information on your connection and how to remedy any problems you may have. Often, just simply disconnecting and rejoining the event might alleviate some of these problems. So how to ask questions. It's easy to submit your questions and answers for our presenters during the event. On the left side of your screen, there's a box labeled Ask a Question where you can enter your questions. Questions related to the webcast topic will be held and answered during the Q&A session at the end of the event. Questions related to technical issues, we got staff on board right now that can help you out right away. And those will be answered in time during the webinar. So now I'm going to hand things over to Mike, and he's going to get started.
Thanks, Mike. First of all, I want to thank everybody for attending. I have over 160, it looks like, on the webinar today. So, again, appreciate you tuning in. A lot of you are probably at home anyway, so what else are you going to do? And I think it's probably incumbent on me to just say Happy Wednesday so we can all remember what day it is. But a little bit about me. If you don't know who I am, I'm Mike Blades, Vice President of Consulting and Research at Frost & Sullivan for Aerospace Defense Security Team here in the Americas. I flew in the Air Force for 21 years, and I've been with Frost & Sullivan ever since I retired, and been conducting research on the unmanned space and training and simulation for 8 years with that company. And today we're gonna go over some of the information that we have in our latest commercial UAV outlook for 2020, which was published back at the end of March. We had to obviously input some information about COVID-19 in here right at the because when this report was published, it was right when COVID-19 was spinning up and becoming, an issue here in the U.S. that had already been underway and causing problems overseas. So we decided let's try to understand, and we probably won't understand the entire effect of COVID on commercial UAS for quite some time. But just from a standpoint of some of the predictions and some of the forecasts we made and trends we saw and putting this report together as they apply to COVID, we thought before COVID that M&A activity would accelerate. We saw quite a bit of activity at the end of 2019. We thought 2019 would be a highly consolidating year for the commercial drone industry, and at the end it did pick up, and we thought that would carry over into 2020 and accelerate. We think that COVID-19 is probably going to have cause that to accelerate even quicker because a lot of capital is going to dry up. There's not going to be a lot of companies looking to invest in the commercial UAS market that maybe we're planning on it this year, as everybody sees the revenue streams dry up to a degree, depending on what portion of the market they're in. That said, we also expect some partnerships to occur, and those partnership agreements accelerating, because in an unknown and sort of unpredictable market, companies like to understand that they can work with those to seek synergies to stay in the market and not be one of those that can't make it through this sort of unpredictable and a surreal time that we're going through right now. We also expect an increased focus on autonomous drones, which is already a trend, but obviously with COVID, there's going to be a lot of push for allowing them to legally and safely operate in low altitude airspace, because there's a lot of things that obviously drones can do when you're looking at keeping social distancing in place, and they're already set up to do a lot of that, obviously from an operational standpoint. And after the pandemic slows, we are expecting a renewed interest in drones. There'll be many existing and discovered use cases where proof of concept has arisen out of COVID-19, the response to it. And we expect acceleration of approvals to use drones delivering medicines, medical supplies, and other urgent items. We expect those waivers to go clear. And the FAA said that they're working on some kind of streamlined process. Hopefully that is finalized soon, so we can see more assistance from drones in COVID response. So from the report, this is just a small market landscape. It's by no means exhaustive. This is how we see the commercial market landscape with platform makers. Then you have drone-to-box. We separate out transitional drones, which in our speak is drones that can take off and land like VTOLs, but fly like fixed wing. The service providers, DSPs, the sensor makers, software, and then data processing, and then that covers just about most of what we look at in the landscape. We don't include counter-UAS. We look at that as an entirely different market. But from a growth perspective from this market, from this report covers 2019 to 2024, or is it 2023? I think it's 2023. I'll look at my notes here really fast. Yeah, it's 2019 to 2023. We're looking at about a 4.5% per year growth in platforms, and that's units. That may seem low, but we're starting from quite a lot of platforms already out there. Most of that growth we expect to be driven by APAC, with India now allowing drone operations, when there used to be a ban. Again, COVID, it'd be interesting to see how COVID affects the global response and the global growth. We were going to try to estimate the effects of COVID on the platform sales, but from an overall perspective, that would take a lot of time. We wanted to get this out, but what we are seeing and what we think is going to happen is that there's going to be more use for COVID response, but there's going to be less use because there's going to be many companies out there that can't afford to use a third-party service anymore because they don't have the revenues in to cover that service. The example that I have used that's fairly simple in the past is, and talking about this, is that a realtor that's going out to sell a home that uses drones to take pictures of a home from above and uses a third-party service to do that, if they're not selling many houses, they're not making a lot of money. So probably one of the first things that's going to drop out of their daily who's moving slides? Their daily work items is they're going to they're just going to take pictures on the ground and use those because they don't want to incur any additional costs while they're not bringing in revenue. So that's just one example. But we see it as a net wash, but we think it'll be in the end a gain for the commercial market because we think that just the view of being able to use drones for more black swan response, like a COVID issue, a pandemic, anything like that, where you're going to be able to use drones even when people can't be near each other, will allow the market to grow even more after we're past this sort of unprecedented time in our history. So another point there, we think the revenue growth is going to be less than the platform unit growth, and that's because we think that the price per platform is going to come down. In the next few years, we'll probably see a stabilization, but we're still seeing a lot of competition where prices are still being dropped in order to compete with others, especially in the industrial side of the equation where we're seeing more adoption. I already talked about growth being driven by APAC. Go to the next slide of technology trends. So we identify several technology trends, which is just a couple I wanted to single out and talk about. We are already kind of hit on the focus on autonomous hardware and software and how that's gaining steam. We see several new hardware and software developments that'll advance the use of commercial drones. Skydio 2 is an example of that. If nothing else, it's a platform for showing how autonomous drones can work now and in the future. Artificial intelligence for data processing. Artificial intelligence, continues to the use and adoption continues to increase for both automating the drone flight and the processing the collected data. While there's speculation as to how much AI can do, many firms are demonstrating that deep learning algorithms can speed up inspections and reduce the amount of time it takes to process data. so the time required to affect business decisions is decreased overall. Some market trends. Again, we identify many market trends. This is just a couple. We're seeing a lot of movement towards scale now that third-party services and end users, like industrial end users, understand more of how to build drone programs, how to operate drone programs, and how to measure ROIs. They're moving more towards scale so they can see even more benefits from the use of a larger drone fleet. And another technology, or I'm sorry, market trend for adoption of capabilities on the drones themselves is live streaming video. Actually saw an article yesterday that's talking about Drone Deploy and Skyward both having live streaming video and adding those to their capabilities within their software. So, excuse me, the industry software service providers, they're seeing increasing demand for this live streaming video. I've also seen that on the civil side with first responders. The main advantage to this is removing the need for post-processing video. In addition, demand will likely increase as 5G grows due to the capability that it can handle more data and higher data speeds, and also experience near zero latency on the 5G. So we talked about consolidation at the end of last year. This is some of the examples. Again, this is not exhaustive, kind of like the landscape, but gives you some idea of what happened. I tried to put in here the examples from the end of the year with Aerodyne acquiring a large share of Measure, even though Measure spun off its software ground control and as a separate business. AirMap and Hanger. Hanger was also an end-to-end enterprise software platform, and AirMap UPM, so trying to give the entire drone airspace picture there. FLIR purchased Aireon Labs, which obviously FLIR has been a subsystem camera, infrared camera, radar provider for many, many years in the military side, and didn't get into the drone business until recently. So now they have two small drones and also unmanned ground vehicles as well. So they're slowly becoming a well-rounded autonomous unmanned systems company. ICR Integrity buying Sky Future. Sky Future is one of the earliest companies to offer drone services, mainly for the oil and gas inspection industry. That's the first instance I remember of a asset management company purchasing a drone services provider. There may be others, but that's the first one that I remember. And then Esri acquiring 3DR Site Scan. Again, all those happened between September and December of last year, and expecting that again to accelerate this year with the added, what would you call it, accelerant of COVID-19. So again, and our company really likes to focus on where are the growth opportunities in growth markets. And so when we go through these exercises, we try to look at it obviously from a goal perspective. And so that's why one of these growth opportunities we identified is investment in APAC. So investing in some of the leading drone firms, especially there's a lot going on in India right now. Obviously, China is more restrictive. It's less of a market that we can get into with our companies, but if they're U.S. based or outside of China. But there will be opportunities in investing in companies that offer, from platforms to software to services in India and elsewhere in the APAC region. And then also sensor fusion. So multiple sensors. I can't remember the company. There's if anybody has a question afterwards, I'll look it up for them. But there's a company that is combining LiDAR and IR cameras to put together a sensory fused set of information that gives better information than just one or the other. So using those separate sensors and fusing to create the 2 and 3D georeference models is very useful for most types of inspections, especially critical infrastructure. So we're seeing a lot of opportunity in that area, and that's increasing. So some takeaways. Again, wanted to keep this fairly short. And no one wants to sit and listen to a webinar for hours on end. So we'll go through the takeaways here, and then we'll open it up to questions. As noted, we are expecting the market to continue growing, although it's going to be relatively slow. We think most of this growth, again, is going to be in APAC, and we're seeing really, and I didn't really talk about this before, but a real shift from consumer prosumer use to industry really adopting the drone. So we are seeing not as many on the unit side, but more expensive drones being purchased because they have a lot more capabilities, and also a movement towards more expensive drones because they're the ones that are going to be able to be operated in all weather conditions. We expect market consolidation and fragmentation to continue. So by consolidation, that's pretty obvious, but by fragmentation, we mean that a lot of the opportunities that we're seeing is in companies in both on the platform software and services areas to be filling niches that other companies aren't doing. If you're doing the same thing everybody else is, obviously you have a lot more competition. But when you have companies that have drones, say like a flyability drone that does specifically interior inspections, or you have a company like Impossible Aerospace or TerraView that are creating drones that have a lot more endurance than a regular DJI drone, there's opportunity for those companies. And as the fragmentation of this market goes, subject matter expertise is being built in different areas. Subject matter expertise in oil and gas will make a company more valuable than if it tries to, gain subject matter expertise across many verticals, and they don't really, offer a different or more refined solutions than its competitor. As the global market, as the global commercial U.S. market transition from nascent to growth, we're seeing a lot of growth opportunities. 2 of them I mentioned earlier. We have 5 listed in the report, but there's more than that, obviously. Again, if anybody wants to try to reach out to me after this webinar, sometime this week or next, happy to talk about anything that we're seeing with regards to growth opportunities. Advanced technologies like computer vision and more precise sensors. Obviously, edge computing. Edge computing we think is going to be huge because of the data, the large amounts of data you're collecting. You're not going to have to transfer all that over small pipe. Excuse me, the small pipes of comms between the drone and the operator, or however you don't want to have everything dependent on sending data to the cloud. There's too much data going back and forth for those comm links to handle. And also, when you start thinking about encrypting any of that data, it even reduces the throughput more. So the needs for hands-on pilots we think will reduce as autonomy increases, but the need for software and AI engineers will increase. It's going to grow a number of industry organizations. We didn't mention all this throughout this webinar, but it's talked about a lot in the report, and that's the need for creating standards. If we want to have a robust commercial UAS market, there's going to have to be standards for best practices and providing specifications that allow for robust processes and that are able to help us sustain safe operations throughout the commercial drone ecosystem. So I think that's the last slide, except for the one that says questions. So I can take questions
now. I'll take over then. So we've got some good ones, Mike. Some really in-depth ones.
Well, I hope I can answer them.
Yeah, I mean, some of these might even be above our combined pay grade. So we'll see.
Well, here's the thing. Let's do this, Mike. If we can't answer them, is there a way we can get contact information and maybe get back to folks later if we can't answer them right now? Or
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
So, what do you see as the future of American-made drone motors? So specifically motors, but I would also open that up to American-made drones.
Yeah, well, okay. So this is interesting, and I haven't read the what is it? The ADSA, the American Drone Security Act. I can't remember the exact name of it. I haven't read too closely, but I do know that we're not going to be able, for government, to use drones that are manufactured in China, right? Or it had ground control systems. I can't remember if motors were in there or not, but there's a whole list of things that you're not supposed to use from China or other countries that are mentioned in the same light as China. So I think there's going to be an opportunity for the U.S. It will also be for U.S. makers, especially ones that source their equipment, their drone equipment from places within the country or within friends from NATO or whoever you see as or whoever's not subject to that ADSA. And again, I haven't gone in depth into understanding all the ins and outs of that and what countries are exempt and what countries we can and can't work with. But the bottom line is our government, the way it is right now, is looking for ways to jumpstart our commercial drone capabilities here with regards to having some sort of industrial base for creating or manufacturing a lot of drones. Now, that said, I don't know how that's going to play out. There's not going to be anything that says if you're a drone services provider that you can't use DJI. And quite honestly, you talk to anybody that owns a DJI drone, and if you're worried about data security, there's easy ways around that. There's plenty of software out there that ensures that all the data stays with you. I think there's a lot of misnomers about that. But the push in general is to have more drones and more drone software and more drone hardware supporting drones come from the U.S. or friendly nations. So there's going to be opportunities there. I just don't know what they're going to look like until we, understand again exactly what that ADSA means. I know it's mostly focused on government use, but there will be opportunities. The problem is we don't have any companies right now, I don't think, that have the capability to provide that industrial base where they can generate the platforms in the same number that like a DJI or a Unique or the companies that are generating thousands of drones a year right now. So more to follow on that.
Yeah, I think that'll be something that we'll be talking about for years, because there's certain economies of scale, right, and production reliability you get.
Now, the other thing to consider, Mike, that I just thought of is, if we're talking specifically about motors, is the issue of airworthiness. Which drones conducting which operations, when beyond visual line of sight happens, will they be required to have some sort of airworthiness certification that requires a specific type of motor? Will the motor have to be made of titanium or something in order to ensure some level of airworthiness and mean time between failures of 10 to the minus ninth or whatever it is? So there are a lot of other issues to consider once we go, we get further down the regulatory path. But again, who knows what airworthiness is going to look like? Who knows what drones conducting what operations are going to be required to have airworthiness certifications, and what are the subsystems going to have to, what kind of subsystems, specifications are going to have to happen in order for you to be certified airworthy. So a lot of things sort of in flux when it comes to that.
Yeah, it sounds like there's an opportunity for specialization. So our next question is, any thoughts on the U.S. Air Force Agility Prime eVTOL procurement effort? Sounds like they want to buy larger UAVs, and the U.S. Marine Corps is also interested in procuring these aircraft. So I guess this is looking at the military buyers, the specs they're looking for versus what we actually have in the commercial market.
Well, the military in general has driven unmanned systems from the beginning. And I mean, when I started conducting research on these markets, I had to do military first because there wasn't really a commercial market back in 2011 when I started doing this. So from that specific program, you're right. The Marines have already done some autonomous flights with K-MAX for many years. And all the services are interested in having some sort of capability of unmanned delivery of equipment in the war zone, which obviously from a military standpoint is easier because you should have, in most of the areas of operation where you're going to need that kind of capability, you're going to have, you're going to have command of the airspace, and you're going to be able to fly things autonomously over areas, at least where we're operating now, mostly where there's a very sparse population and not a whole lot of buildings to fly over, things like that. So, but the military being involved should allow a quicker advancement of the technology, because the military has a lot of money to test. They don't have to worry about the VC coming in and funding things, and if they're not funded, it goes away. So I think it's going to do nothing but good and maybe accelerate the process, but I think it's going to be more focused on delivery of goods, which I just sent out a note earlier about how SaberWing was talking about their testing. I think the larger drones delivering equipment and supplies, and even from a commercial standpoint, cargo, I think that's going to be a market much sooner than the air taxi market, just because you're not delivering people, where again you're going to have a lot of airworthiness issues, a lot of things that are going to have to be certified safe over thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of testing, and the things that are delivering cargo are not going to be held to as high a standard, just because of the lessening of liability that goes along with that. But so overall, I think that there's nothing negative about, only positive about the military being involved in these eVTOL programs. They can only accelerate the process.
So we have a question from mutual friend Andy Sterling, and the reason I'm pulling it up is because hey Andy, the reason I'm pulling it up closer is not because we know him, but because it's relevant to something that was said kind of recently. So Mike, when you say standards, do you mean SOPs or more like airworthiness standards, or both?
Oh, both. I don't think everybody can make their own their operating procedures within their drone program, but I think we're going to see a lot more standards. They've actually, I'm going to pull up my report here. So just recently, the first international standard for UAS, the ISO 21384-2 Unmanned Aircraft Systems Part 3 Operation Procedures, was published in 2019 as a global standard. And there's also standards being developed by like American Society for Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing, ASPRS, that identifies the best processing I'm sorry, I'm talking too fast. That'll identify the post-processing best practices, and allow people to quantify and verify the accuracy of mapping projects with a level of certainty and a level of standardization. So the bottom line is the promise or illusion of accurate measurements in the future isn't going to be sufficient when you're using drones. So I think we're going to see an increase in those types of standards, as well as companies with their own drone fleets that they operate themselves are going to institute standard operating procedures, and that'll be ingrained in hopefully in a corporate from a corporate view to continue that as they grow. So I think that's good. I think the overall answer to that question is both. Expect the standards in both of those areas to increase.
Okay, so we're seeing a lot of questions come in. I just want to remind everybody that if we're unable to answer it during the time allotted here, and I think we have 30 more minutes. Mike we'll have these questions sent to him, and he'll be able to respond to you afterwards also.
I'm happy to do the whole 30 minutes.
I mean, I'm here, I'm learning, so I'm happy to stay also. So can you provide an example of an industry that has experienced reduced data analysis times as a result of AI tools? And I think kind of the undercurrent of this question is, yes, it's nice to have this extra complexity and new data, but until I could get it to insight and action and reduce that timeline, is it worth it to me to invest?
I have not heard anywhere where people are in any verticals or any specific applications where AI is detrimental. I think more so where there are cases where AI didn't add anything. But For the most part, everything that I think AI is, again, it's only as good as the amount of data that you're feeding into the AI. I mean, your AI is not going to be good if you're not feeding a bunch of data into it so that the models can learn. And I mean, I'm not an AI expert by any means, and this specific question would probably be better asked by companies that are actually integrating in the process of integrating AI into their software or into their subsystems of their still software, but the subsystems that allow the drone to fly autonomously. That's probably a good question for Skydio to understand how AI is affecting autonomous operation. Another company that probably be good to talk to about AI is Percepto, drone in box companies. Those companies, both from my standpoint on drone operations from a navigation standpoint, are ahead of the curve on understanding how AI influences the operation of the drone from a software and data collection and processing standpoint. I know Drone Deploy uses AI. Everybody says they use AI. It's just for the most part because they think they have to say that in order to say, look, if we're not using AI and somebody else is, then maybe we'll lose customers because that's kind of a catchphrase. Whether it's really adding anything to the efficacy of the data or the speed of which data is processed or whatever is, you kind of have to use it beforehand, or you have to use it and see the results before you can evaluate it. But from a overall perspective, I have not heard of any negatives, only positives. So if I do, I'll be sure to note it, but not just as of yet.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's examples. There has to be examples. AI can't be helpful in every aspect, and I'm sure there are people who have tried a certain algorithm and it's just caused more problems than good. But I don't know of any specific examples.
Yeah, there's kind of like two lines here. There's supervised and unsupervised learning. So if it's unsupervised, you need a bigger data set. Supervised means you're labeling it, and if you put garbage in, you get garbage out. And so, picking the right partner if you're trying to integrate tools from the data analysis side will definitely be important. So what's influencing the growth in the APAC market?
Well, there's several things. The two major things are just the fact that the regulations are opening up, and there's still growth in China, although it's not a lot of addressable growth. There's still companies selling a lot of, from a unit standpoint, a lot of units for precision ag. There's a lot of crop spraying going on. The crop sprayers that they're using, it's because the agriculture over in that region is completely different than how we do it here. We have in the U.S. we have a lot of large industrial farms that use a lot of integrated precision agriculture products that involve automated tractors, ground sensors, drones. And then all that information is put together in a centralized solution, like things that John Deere provide or Case, and it's a huge operation. And basically, the drone is just a tool within that precision ag solution. And overseas in APAC and even in Africa to a degree, although on a smaller scale because of the fact that they don't have a lot of money to spend on drones, but they can get a lot of return on investment because they need to scrape every possible increase in productivity that they can get out of their fields over there for the population. But in APAC, it's an entirely different way of conducting agriculture. So the sprayers over there can be smaller, just like what they've been doing in Japan since the early 90s with the RMAX. But the RMAX is very expensive, $120,000 plus. These agriculture sprayers like what XAG puts out and what then DJI's Agris, those are all, well, in our vernacular, professional drones that are like $5,000 or more, but still nowhere near the $120,000. But they have a spraying capability, and they're selling many more of those now because they have a lot more capability at a lot lower price. So that's driving some. And then again, just so the change in rules is in a country like India, which has a fifth of the world's population. is going to be a significant catalyst for growth from a goal perspective.
So this one is it might be a hard question to answer, but I think there's value in kind of looking from the pilot upwards. What key features are missing in the market right now for drone pilots, and as well as the drone service consumers? So, the people who are looking for their services.
I'm sorry, say it again. What about the drone pilot?
So what key features are missing in the market right now for drone pilots? And then the next level up is as well as the drone service consumers, the people that would be purchasing those individual pilot services.
Oh, that is a good question. Key things missing for drone pilots. I don't know that there's technology missing. I think maybe the answer is more of the drone pilots don't know what's out there. There's a lot of technology out there, man. There's a lot of good platforms. There's a lot of good end-to-end software. Again, a lot of it's going to be based on what your specific application is going to be, and maybe where your subject matter expertise lies. But I don't know if there's anything that maybe just a turnkey solution that does everything you want. Look, I hate to say this, I don't like to look at things from a drone pilot perspective, because I think that 5 to 10 years down the road, once we have beyond visual line of sight, and once we have airworthiness in place, and I think there's not going to be a whole lot of need for drone pilots. I think there's going to be a whole lot of need for drone monitors. And the aviation portion of that is going to be making decisions based on the feedback you get from your automated drones. I think I don't want to say that the drone pilot's going to be a fossil, but I think that as we understand what the cost savings are when you talk about using drones for just about any application, it's the manpower, right? So the trend towards automation, the trend towards multiple drones being used to conduct an operation at the same time, like in a swarm, like what Vhive does. And I think Alpha Unmanned just talked about operating multiple drones at the same time. All those kinds of things are gonna move us towards the reduced need for drone pilots, but an increased need for drone monitoring, drone software engineers, all those kinds of things that are more keeping the drone maintenance, keeping the drones flying, and making decisions based on what those drones are doing from an autonomous perspective, where you have a man or woman on the loop rather than in the loop. So on the services side, that's even, I think, more difficult to answer, because it depends on the vertical. There's a lot of solutions out there, and a lot of good solutions out there for, say, oil and gas, because the ROI that you get using drones in a lot of applications that are related to oil and gas is pretty in your face. So it's a no-brainer to use drones for them, like flare stack inspection is one of them. But other than that, I'm not sure exactly how to answer that question. Might be something better to have a phone call.
That was a long non-answer. I suppose the bridge between the in-the-loop future that you're talking about and where we are now is just the expertise, knowledge of airspace. Not everybody cares to know that stuff, and we've seen a lot of washouts on the pilot side from not caring about that stuff.
Yeah, but when it comes down to automation and you have UTM and stuff and those things in place, you're going to have either airborne or ground-based or both sense and avoid capability for the drone. So they're going to be able to miss each other in other aircraft, or else it's probably not going to be a functioning system until that again, there's like a 10 to the minus 9 probability that nothing's going to fail. So I don't know how to excuse me, I don't know how to say anything more past that. It's just that once this entire ecosystem is done, it's going to be a very I think autonomous setup.
All right. I mean, that's the future we're trying to build, right? So next question. We have seen some quite dramatic regulatory concessions issued to enable COVID-related UAS operations in Europe. Have you seen any example of these concessions in the U.S.? And do you feel the industry may be able to capitalize, retain, and build on these regulatory concessions post-COVID? It seems like an easy sell to me.
Well, go read the press release from UPS Workhorse and Drone Up that came out yesterday, and you will see exactly what's going on. That Drone Up was delivering a bunch of things, third party, that would normally be under Part 135. That's that they conduct under Part 107. So there's opportunities if you know how to if you understand how to state your case when it comes to waivers. I haven't had the opportunity to actually ask for a waiver or go through the waiver process. I've only been explained to from people who've actually done it. And I think the FAA just put out or was AUVSI just put out a report on all the waivers that have been granted, over like 4,000 or something, and they have them all broken down. You can go look at a dashboard that shows you what all the waivers are for. It's pretty cool information. But as it relates to COVID, it's interesting. I've seen a lot of several companies who are very flexible and very forward-thinking have been able to benefit from this, because there are applications that they're using these drones for that they weren't using them for before COVID. Like, Zipline and other companies, Zipline, UPS, and others that were delivering for medical purposes, Swoop Arrow and a couple others were almost specifically for medical supplies, and they're doing that too, but on a larger basis now because of the quick reactionary need for those kinds of supplies during this, sort of unprecedented time. But they're also engaging in things like, I think probably most of the people on the call saw the Dragonfly pandemic drone that they're trying to develop with, I think it was South Australia University or some University of Australia. That's supposed to be able to, at least pre-screen people from a distance as to whether they may be having COVID symptoms with regard to their fever, temperature, and coughing and things like that. So that's an application that wasn't even a consideration before this pandemic. And then also spraying for sanitization. So basically doing the same thing as crop spraying, but sanitizing areas. I talked to Matt Dunleavy at Skyscopes, and they've been able to sanitize playgrounds for so the kids can go play on the playground, and after they're done, we sanitize it again. I saw companies talking about being able to sanitize interiors of buildings, flying over before a athletic event, and sanitizing the entire area by spraying some sort of sanitizer on, and then letting it dry and leave. And then Airtos, or the digital airless, even had their drone Airtos would show that they can sanitize using light. I'd like to see the specifics on that, but I guess there's a light band that you can use that sort of destroys, or that just not sort of, but destroys the virus. I don't know if it was COVID specific or just a certain virus that they tested. I don't know. I just saw the report talking about that possible capability. So there's a bunch of different use cases that we probably didn't think of before, and there'll probably even more come out as COVID is dealt with from between now and when it sort of subsides, and who knows if it's going to resurface again in the fall, like they're saying. And maybe we have even more time to think about ways we can use drones to help with the response to a second wave. So I think there's more uses that we didn't realize. There's probably going to be more discovered, and I think there's going to be a push for an expanded, or at least a more streamlined way to operate drones to respond to these kinds of black swan events, if you want to call them that, in the future.
So this is a really good one, and I think one of the kind of things that isn't thought about enough is support infrastructure from other industries to kind of get us to this UTM that we're looking to build. What, if any, is growth dependent on 5G network availability?
That's a good question. I think it's a very interesting question, because 5G, from my perspective, is really going to be, well, first of all, 5G as I understand it, is very it's very limited in range because it's millimeter wave. So you're gonna, in order for, I mean, it's great technology because gosh, I can't remember if it was 100 times or 1,000 times. Skyward was talking about this. Skyward's really high on 5G, obviously, because they're part of Verizon. But they were talking about how many more Internet of Things devices you can have on 5G and still experience, zero latency or near zero latency, and the amount of data that can be transmitted back and forth is just night and day compared to 4G. I don't know what the numbers are, but it's going to enable, I think, a lot more operations in urban areas. The question is, what's going to have to happen in the rural areas? And from what I understand, you're going to be able to get your own 5G antenna or whatever. Say if you want to install it in your at your farm and use drones on 5G. I don't know what the expense of that's going to be, but 5G is going to, I think, enable all of urban air mobility, including drones. I mean, I don't know that you're going to be able to have the amount of things flying around. I mean, I know cellular works now. I know Squawk has worked. If no one's heard of that company, it's pretty cool that they have a comm card that has multiple, what do they call them? Transmission and transmitters and receivers, but they're all the different carriers. So if you're flying around in your drone, you have this card, and you basically what it ends up doing is it allows you to move from antenna to antenna, and no matter what carrier is strongest there, it can switch to, say, if it's Verizon or if it's AT&T or whoever. It allows you to maintain connectivity and gives you a backup capability if you were to lose comms on one of those. And it uses 3 and 4G. So that's great for connectivity, but for actual throughput, I think 5G is going to enable all these things that are be flying in the air that require, constant communications in order for C2. I don't know if it's going to be necessary, but I think it's going to be are necessary soon, but it will be necessary as we get more and more and more devices operating on the current 3 and 4G LTE or whatever. I hope that was answering the question.
It's not. I mean, there's a lot of layers to that could even extend beyond what you're talking about. But I think that's sufficient enough answer for the day. So UAS drones using hydrogen fuel cells. So what are your thoughts on hydrogen fuel cells?
Well, I think hydrogen. Currently, it gives you a lot of endurance. I mean, and it allows a lot of those delivery. I mean, I don't know if you saw or people online saw the Doosan drone that flew 43 miles from a mainland to an island. Can't remember where it was. Down in the what do you call it? Virgin Islands, I think, somewhere. Anyway, that took a hybrid type of propulsion. That's a good question. I think for the time being, I mean, we don't want to use gas. If you want to have or regular fuel gas, if you want to have any kind of endurance, past an hour or two, where you have to fly a long distance, that might be your solution. I know that Doosan and other companies, H3 Dynamics and or a part of H3 Dynamics, is really looking and investing in those hydrogen-powered type of propulsions. So I think there's a place for them as batteries become more and more have more and more energy density for smaller size. That the usefulness for that might go away, but I don't know how long that's going to take. The increase in battery energy density has been really, I think it's like 5% per year over the last several years. So that's another issue with the UAM, is how long it's going to take for us to have, or AAM, as NASA's calling it now, for us to get actual all-electric air taxis or drones that carry large amounts of cargo, because they're not going to have the energy density and the size of battery that they need to get very far. So Yeah, I think there's going to be some market for that. I haven't really looked into that a whole lot. It might be best to talk to someone like Colin Gwynn, who's worked with Doosan on theirs, to understand better about the potential there. I don't claim to know everything, not even close, but a lot of times I can point you in the direction of the person who might know more, or probably knows more than I do about it. So if there's whoever asked that question, if there's a way for them to contact me and I can get them the information to contact someone like Colin or another person that works specifically in that area of
yeah, we'll remind everybody of your
yeah.
of your contact info at the end.
Okay.
This way they could get in touch with you, and also we'll have these questions sent over to you so you can answer them.
Yep.
Last one before we kind of wrap things up. Does Frost have an estimated market size for 2020 to 2024, or even in the next 2 years? I'd be curious.
Well, we'll put another one of these out at the beginning of next year, and it'll have that. I don't have the bandwidth to do this like every quarter. I wish I did. And I really don't think there's going to be enough movement to change our estimates that would require us to do a quarterly report. If people want to get a hold of me and ask me about trend, again, we put out these forecasts, and we do our best to get information from manufacturers and from people who are in the industry using drones, and how much growth they're seeing, or how much growth they're not seeing, or how much what they're expecting regionally, what they're expecting overseas, all those kinds of data points to try and come up, existing or past historical sales, from DJI. A lot of this market can be developed from DJI having, their percentage and what their increase each year is, and then kind of going from there. But our focus isn't as much on the forecasting as it is on understanding the trends and the growth opportunities, because you can get forecasts from 20 or 30 different companies out there, but if you don't understand what to do with the forecast, you don't understand how to take the information you're getting and apply it to your specific set of opportunities, or what your company does in order to help you grow your bottom line, then what good is a forecast? So that's what we're really concentrating on, and that's why we try not to do an overabundance of forecasts, because my mantra's always been every forecast is wrong, doesn't matter how wrong. So we try to be as less wrong than everybody else, and sometimes we are, sometimes we aren't.
Thanks, Mike. So just want to remind everybody that you can find Mike on Twitter, Michael S. Blades, or Mike S. Blades?
Mike S. Blades.
Would you like to give the audience your email address so they can connect with you afterwards?
Yeah, it's easy. It's my name, michael.blades@frost.com, FROST.com.
And I'd also like to remind the audience that this webinar will be saved and put on our online education platform, Launchpad. So that's launchpad.interdrone.com. You'll be able to find this webcast and all future webcasts going forward on that platform. Thank you so much, Mike, for joining us today and sharing your insights on the global market, for being a great analyst, and say thanks to your team for putting this data together and doing the extended Q&A period, because I think a lot of people's questions are unique, and that was very valuable. So thank you, everybody, for attending.
Hope to see you soon, Mike.
Yeah, see you soon, Mike.
All right, take care.
Bye, everyone.